Coming up on a newscast, President Yoon delivers a speech at the B20 summit in Bali. He emphasized that a solution to supply issues must be found in order to start tackling multifaceted crises the world faces. President Joe Biden holds a summit with his Chinese counterpart. It's the first time the two are meeting in person since Biden took office. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo pledged to devise extraordinary measures to prevent another tragedy like the Itaewon crowd crush from happening again. And pan-governmental discussions are held this week with the public taking part. Hope your week's off to a smooth start. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. President Yoon is wrapping up his first of a two-day visit to Bali for summits related to the G20. The South Korean leader spent most of the day carrying out his Southeast Asia economic diplomacy, expanding ties and building stronger supply chains. Our Moon Gon-young starts us off.
Digital transformation led by the private sector. President Yoon proposed it as a solution to the multifaceted crisis the world faces today at the business arm of the Group of 20 dialogue in Bali Monday. Identifying the current crisis as one triggered by shock on the supply side during the recovery of the pandemic, supply chain disruptions, and an array of geopolitical conflicts, Yoon suggested digital transition to achieve supply-side innovation.
디지털 기술이 기존의 산업 데이터와 결합하며 비용 절감과 동시에 새로운 가치를 창출해 나가는 과정에서 끊임없이 새로운 비즈니스가 발생하고 있습니다.
This is in line with his earlier proposal in New York in September, where he called for the establishment of a new digital order.
누구도 소외되지 않고 디지털 시대의 혜택을 공유할 수 있도록 B20가 중심이 돼서 인류가 공감하는 디지털 질서를 정립해 나가기를 기대합니다.
President Yoon also took his first step in executing the economic agenda of South Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy, with the key word being diversification. Yoon and Indonesian President Joko Widodo met with economic policymakers, government officials, and business leaders of both countries to discuss investment and supply chain cooperation at a South Korea-Indonesia business roundtable.
This is South Korea's first economic cooperation with a Southeast Asian country since we are unveiling our new South Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. Our government plans to promote this economic cooperation based on diversification that is expanding our ties to all ASEAN nations and building supply chain resilience.
On Tuesday, President Yoon takes part in the main event at the summit of the Group of 20, where he'll come face-to-face with leaders of the world's major advanced and emerging economies in the multilateral framework. One of them will be Chinese President Xi Jinping. With South Korea having unveiled its new Indo-Pacific strategy and its stance on rules-based international order based on freedom and value, it may be opportune for both leaders to break the ice and sit down for a bilateral here on this Indonesian island this tour around. Still, no confirmation yet on whether there's been a decision. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News, Bali.
President Yoon met with Korean business leaders in Indonesia to hear directly about difficulties they may be facing. The luncheon was his first stop in Bali. He thanked them for outstanding work and entrepreneurship despite difficult economic conditions and pledged greater government support. Some firms hope to benefit from government financing tailored to SMEs, which has been difficult to get when doing business outside of Korea. Among the 11 in attendance were young entrepreneurs working in ICT and healthcare. The event was held as the president wished to boost sales diplomacy during the Southeast Asia tour. Shifting our focus to the first in-person meeting between the leaders of the U.S. and China since President Joe Biden took office. This comes at a time when tensions are mounting over a number of issues. Our Shin Se-byuk is standing by on the line with the details. Se-byuk, do fill us in.
Well, Daniel, as you said, U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are currently holding talks in Bali a day before the G20 summit officially kicks off. Well, beforehand, Xi and Biden greeted each other with a handshake. The two leaders also delivered their opening remarks. President Biden spoke of the importance of avoiding conflict between Washington and Beijing and said he seeks to find ways to work together on urgent global issues. Xi also hoped that the two leaders would chart the right course for a bilateral relationship. But as to whether the two leaders can actually find some middle ground through the summit, expectations are very low. A senior White House official told CNN that the main objective is not about reaching agreements, but rather about gaining a better understanding of each other's priorities and reducing misconceptions. Also, a similar message came out from Beijing. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson on Monday said China hopes the two countries can, quote-unquote, properly manage differences, promote mutually beneficial cooperation, avoid misunderstandings and miscalculations. Well, talks are set to last for several hours, so more on the meeting should be available in the next few hours.
And Sebyok, with the talks coming at new low in bilateral ties, it will be helpful to have more experts on the table. Who else is part of the delegations?
Well, Daniel, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken were among the American representatives, and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was among the Chinese delegation. The summit is significant as it marks the first face-to-face presidential meeting between the two leaders since Biden took office in January last year. Also, it comes at a time when bilateral relations have reached their lowest point in half a century over a range of issues. And those include disputes over Taiwan, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, technology, and differing visions of the world order. Xi and Biden have spoken to each other 5 times over the past 2 years, but these were never enough to resolve conflict or narrow differences between the two sides. So now all eyes are on whether the two sides can at least begin discussing ways to stabilize their soured relations. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Sebyok, thank you for those updates. We appreciate it. Moving on to other stories now, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan will share warning data on North Korea's missiles in real time in a way that can benefit all three sides. That's according to the Defense Ministry's deputy spokesperson, who noted the three countries will likely hold further discussions on the matter and that cooperation will make enabling sharing of more precise info such as the location of where the missiles are launched from as well as their direction. In a joint statement, the three leaders agreed on this during talks in Cambodia to improve ability to detect and assess the threats posed by incoming missiles. The government will start discussions to overhaul the safety management system to prevent a tragedy like the Itaewon crowd crush from happening again. The police will also take on its own internal reform to enhance disaster prevention and management capacities. Lee Kyung-eun has the latest.
The death toll from the deadly crowd crush in Itaewon has risen by 1 to 158. Authorities on Sunday said the latest victim is a young Korean woman in her 20s. Of the 196 people injured, 10 are still in hospital. Among the 26 foreigners who died, the bodies of 2 are waiting to be transported back to their home countries. To prevent another Itaewon tragedy, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo on Monday promised to come up with extraordinary measures and to overhaul the nation's safety system from reporting, managing operations and manuals. A special pan-government task force will get started with the related discussions this week.
The government will make sure to include the opinions of experts and the public. Please open a communication channel for this to happen as soon as possible.
On the same day, the government also announced a clearer picture of its vision to adopt a smart ICT-based crowd control management system. By next year, it will incorporate the location data of mobile phone users and public transit volume into the central government's geographic information system. They will automatically analyze the level of density. When a potential accident is detected, the system will alert the local police and fire authorities, who will then check for themselves and send disaster messages if necessary. More upgrades will follow in 2024.
We've discussed the extended research and development plans to incorporate CCTV and drones into analyzing crowd density and hope to formulate the actual measures by the end of the year.
Meanwhile, in the aftermath of the controversial handling of the tragedy by police, the nation's police agency will also set up a task force responsible for ramping up training and improving reporting system. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
South Korea's national college entrance exam, known as Suneung, is on this week. Until Wednesday, designated vehicles will be delivering exam papers to the 84 test districts. After being stored at undisclosed locations, they'll be distributed on the morning of the test. Seoul's Prime Minister ordered government bodies such as the Health Ministry and the National Police Agency to review COVID-19 and safety management plans. This year, some 500,000 students are set to take what's considered the most important exam of their lives. South Korea began administering additional Pfizer vaccines specifically targeting the BA.4 and BA.5 Omicron variants. Health officials are encouraging people to get the shots as the nation is now in its 7th wave of COVID-19. Lee explains further.
Beginning Monday, South Korea is administering an additional bivalent COVID-19 booster, the Pfizer vaccine that specifically targets the BA.4 and BA.5 Omicron variants. This is in addition to the Moderna and Pfizer shots that target the BA.1 variant. The shots are available to adults 18 and over who have completed their primary series of vaccinations or caught COVID-19 at least 4 months ago. But people who had COVID-19 at least 4 months ago must also have completed their primary series of vaccinations. South Korean health authorities on Monday strongly encouraged people to get vaccinated for the winter, explaining that the resurgence has begun in South Korea.
Recently, the number of infections has risen, marking the 7th resurgence of COVID-19. The number of critically ill patients and deaths is also on an increasing trend, rising more than 1.6 and 2 times respectively than that from a month ago.
The statistics website Our World in Data says as of Sunday that South Korea had the world's highest 7-day average of new cases per million people. This is among countries with more than 500,000 people. For every million people in South Korea, there were around 996 new cases. Taiwan recorded the next highest at around 877, followed by Hong Kong at 734. South Korea reported 23,765 new COVID-19 cases on Monday. That's the highest number reported on a Monday in 9 weeks. There are 413 who are severely ill and there were 44 more deaths. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports in the tech sector fell for the 4th straight month. According to the Trade Ministry, outbound shipments of ICT products last month declined more than 10% on year to around $17.9 billion. By sector, semiconductors fell 16% due to dipping memory chip prices. There were declines also for displays and computers. But an increase in exports of high value-added parts led a rise in the mobile sector overall. ICT imports, on the other hand, saw an increase to almost $14 billion, mainly driven by the strengthening dollar. The resulting surplus of about $4 billion was the smallest so far this year. The growing demand for EVs and the batteries that power them has countries looking to secure supplies of lithium and other key minerals. The U.S. and the EU are seeking to reduce their dependence on China, and so the South Korean government and the private sector are working together to take the lead in the race to secure the country's place in the EV battery supply chain. Hyun reports.
Rechargeable batteries, or secondary batteries, are essential for electric vehicles. And to produce them, minerals like lithium are needed. South Korea is putting more effort into becoming a frontrunner in the global race to secure important elements used in EV production. As part of these efforts, the country's steel-making giant POSCO Holdings built a lithium mining plant in Salar de Hombre Muerto, located at an altitude of 4,000 meters in Argentina's Salta province.
This is just the beginning for POSCO Group to strengthen our secondary battery material business and a milestone for the 100-year-old corporation's future goals.
And even the technology required to extract materials from used secondary batteries has been developed in Korea too.
Smelting reduction technology can recover over 90% of lithium and 95% of nickel and cobalt out of used batteries. We aim to contribute to the development of a resource circular economy.
There's also a company that has developed technology that can make the process of producing secondary batteries more than 85% efficient in terms of power used during manufacturing.
This major electric energy transition technology brings high efficiency by minimizing losses.
But there are rising concerns too, as Washington recently announced rules that include giving EV buyers a tax break for cars with batteries made with minerals mined or processed in the U.S. or country and regions with free trade agreements in place. Because South Korea heavily relies on China for battery materials, the government and the industry plan to establish a one-team strategy to overcome what's seen as a crisis for the industry.
As countries like the US and those in the EU are seeing the secondary battery industry as a means of economic security, the government and the private sector should cooperate strategically to expand the market.
Specifically, the plans include battery makers and the government cooperating on the whole process from excavating and smelting to supply minerals. By working together, the government aims to increase South Korea's global market share to 40% in 2030, becoming world leaders in the market. Itaewon, Arirang News.
Over in Ukraine, residents of the Kherson were celebrating after Russian troops withdrew. However, due to new damage done to an important dam, residents are likely to be without water or power for some time. Yoon brings the updates.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine started on February 24th, and for 8 months, residents of Kherson lived under brutal Russian occupation. The city was also the only regional capital that had been captured by Russian forces since the invasion began. On Friday, Russian troops retreated out of the Kherson region, leaving residents euphoric. Despite being without water, internet connection, and having only a limited supply of power, people gathered on the streets with Ukrainian flags, shouting freedom and glory as they welcomed Ukrainian troops into the city.
We're meeting our soldiers. We're happy that they came. It finally happened. Glory to God and glory to Ukraine. We're throwing flowers on everyone who passes, on tanks and on cars, on everybody.
And the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced Kherson being reclaimed, marking a historic day.
Today is a historic day. We are getting the south of the country back. We are getting Kherson back. As of now, our defenders are at the city's outskirts. We are very close to entering the city, but special operation forces are already in.
While the retreat of Russian troops is significant in marking a failed effort by Russia to stamp out Ukrainian identity in the region, Kherson still remains dangerous. Following Russia's withdrawal, there has been new damage to the major Nova Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine, as well as several bridges that cross the Dnipro River, including the collapse of the Antonivsky Bridge on the only road from Kherson to the Russian-controlled eastern bank of the Dnipro River. But these threats have been unable to drown out the victory cheers coming from the newly liberated Ukrainian city. Yoon, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, Bangladesh is grappling with its worst outbreak of dengue fever in 3 years. As of Sunday, more than 200 people have died from the disease this year. The previous record was 179 reported throughout 2019. In just 24 hours, 860 new infections were added. The country's total virus tally this year is nearly 50,000. The rapid surge in dengue cases has been attributed to the country's heavier and longer than usual monsoon, as stagnant water becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes. In the world of sports, the South Korean national team is in Qatar for the World Cup. With their first game against Uruguay right around the corner, the Taeguk Warriors are focused on achieving the best possible results. Kim Do-yeon has the full story.
South Korea's men's national football team landed in Qatar on Monday morning with the goal of qualifying for the knockout rounds of the World Cup for the first time since 2010. Of the 26 players who are on the final national team roster, 8 currently playing in Europe will be flying directly to Qatar due to their respective schedules. Suneung, currently recovering from a fractured eye socket, will be the last player to arrive on Wednesday local time.
Of course, we know that the results we reach along the process were important. And of course, we will try to do everything.
The Taeguk Warriors will begin their Group H games against Uruguay on November 24th, before facing Ghana and Portugal on November 28th and December 2nd, respectively. All 3 matches will be held at the Education City Stadium in Al Rayyan, just west of Doha, and only 20 minutes by bus from where the players are staying.
If us defenders do well on our part, our team is fully capable of scoring.
One extra player, Oh Hyun-gyu of Suwon Samsung Blue Wings, is also traveling with the squad as a possible replacement for Son. The team will officially begin training late Monday evening at the Al Egla training facility. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Blackpink and 17 both won 2 awards each at the 2022 MTV Europe Music Awards held in Düsseldorf. The K-pop girl group won Best Metaverse Performance for their virtual in-game concert held in August. Its member Lisa won Best K-pop. The boy band won Best New Awards, which recognizes rising stars, and Best Push Award, which goes to the act that outperformed others during the MTV Push campaign. BTS bagged the biggest fan award for the 5th year in a row. TXT, another K-pop group, won Best Asia Act. There are ongoing efforts to ensure steady supplies of water in rural communities. A group of researchers are betting on a well built with dry sand. Cho Sung-min sheds light on the developments.
While South Korea provides a stable water supply to 97.5% of its people, there are still some who worry whether they'll be able to get a cup of clean water. For instance, this small village of some 40 households in Gangwon-do province still has water shortage issues.
There are no water problems during the monsoon season, but it all dries up later, so we can only use it for cooking.
To ensure that water reaches every household, even in rural areas, local researchers have developed a new type of dam. Dubbed the Sand Dam, it is said to provide a stable supply of water for at least 10 days, even in a severe drought. It is built by stacking 3 different types of dry sand and pebbles, serving as an artificial water well that stores water underground. Because the dam is made with sand, the water is highly unlikely to evaporate or freeze, making it a perfect source of water regardless of the season. Providing 190 tons of water to the village per day, it's also proven to provide cleaner water as the sand layers act as a natural filter.
The system is designed so that water is collected through the pipes with small holes connected to the main storage. We applied for a patent on filter pack screen which prevents small sand particles from being jammed inside.
Because the sand dam only costs 10% of what is normally required to install water utilities, researchers are expecting to start constructing facilities like these in some 600 places nationwide that have inconsistent sources of water. Cho Sung-min, Arirang News.
A surge of cold air mass crossing over South Korea will bring much colder temperatures tomorrow. The morning will be especially cold with lows dropping to 4 degrees Celsius in Seoul. Frigid winds will make conditions feel much colder than the actual readings. As there will be big fluctuation in temperatures, make sure to dress in layers. For the East Coast, high waves are in the forecast with dangerous rip currents possible. For areas near the coastlines, it's highly recommended to stay away from breakwaters and piers. And as for the air quality, we'll have no worries about fine dust as the air is circulating at a fairly fast rate. The entire nation will see air quality standing in the normal to good category. In the regions, we'll see morning lows in single figures tomorrow. Chuncheon will be especially cold at 0 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to 14 degrees, Gwangju 16, Busan and Jeju will be reaching 17 degrees. On Thursday, which is a National College Entrance Exam Day, clear skies are in the forecast with wide temperature gaps. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
These are the stories we're following at this hour. From all of us here at Arirang News, as always, thank you for watching.